Hey guys, welcome back to another podcast of the RepPath. Welcome back to another RepPath podcast. Today we're going to be talking about the differences in selling in different environments. So we're going to focus on the three major environments: office-based, surgery centers, and hospital. But before we jump into that, guys, as always, please make sure from this moment on you're submitting your questions into the chat. And James, our producer, will take care of those and we'll address them about halfway through the show. Also, if you want to see a copy of this podcast or any other material that we have, please make sure you go and subscribe to my YouTube channel, Unfiltered Medical Sales Coaching, so you can get all our content. Also, any individuals that are looking to break into the industry, if you haven't done it yet, guys, please make sure that you join the RepPath Academy. We're getting new candidates placed every day, guys. So it's an amazing place to be where we're seeing these candidates come in there frustrated. They're not getting responses from companies. They're getting ghosted by recruiters. They've been searching on their own for months and maybe secured one or two interviews that have gone nowhere. If any of you are in this situation, please make sure, go on RepPath.com. You could see our website here. These are all the companies that we've placed with, and we've placed hundreds more that are not on that list. These are just some of the main ones. And make sure you go on there and look at those testimonials. These are all people that are in the same position as you are, guys. So check those out. Check out the RepPath Academy. If you do need to reach out to me for any further information, please send me a DM or go to my email, joe@reppath.com. And other than that, I always forget something. Sorry, James. We are live today on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm drawing a blank. And then we're also on every podcast platform, known to man. So just had to give some of that housekeeping. And now let's just dive right in, guys. So today's topic, again, this is selling in the different environments. So some of you guys have been in the industry a long time. You know the situation, which is great. You've sold in hospitals, you sold office space, you've sold to surgery centers. So this really isn't the topic for you. But for you individuals, either trying to break into the industry or you're in the industry and you just haven't sold in a different environment. You only worked in office space. Now you're looking to get into hospitals. So this is a great conversation. Great podcast today for you individuals, because we're going to go over the differences on what it takes to be successful in these environments. So just to start off, guys, again, you have a certain sales approach, and that's great. We've all keep working on it. We master whatever we want to master in terms of our approach, in terms of our customer base, calling on different customers, and then also, going in there, and learning the material, which is obviously very important. But yet the one key difference, guys, you got to realize that you can't go in there with the same approach in these three different environments, because if you do, you're going to fail. Okay. You have to approach them differently. They're all different. The material's the same, again, there's still doctors in every account. There's still nurses. There's still similar looking customers. But again, the landscape is different. The environment is different. And we're going to go over what that means. All right. So first off, we're going to start with office space. Now, office space is typically how the majority of you are going to break into this industry, calling on offices. Okay. I'm not saying that's an entry-level role by any means, but just a lot of individuals, especially in the pharma side, it's very rare that they're going to hire a pharmaceutical sales rep and then put them right into the hospital environment. It's a more complicated environment, straight up. So you're going to start in the office-based, position. And when you're calling on offices, okay, one of the key differences, they're smaller. All right, you're going to be in offices that have one physician. They could have 20 physicians, but overall, they're going to be a smaller environment than ambulatory surgery centers and hospitals. Okay, so nothing is easy. So I don't want to sit here and say because it's smaller, it's going to be easier. The buying process does get more complicated as you get into those other environments. But when it comes to office space, again, it's smaller. You're typically dealing with, a front office receptionist, then they'll have nursing staff, an office manager, and a doctor. And 99.9% of the time, the doctor is the one that's going to make that final decision. All right. Now, it could be owned by that physician. It could be a privately owned practice, okay, which does make things easier because essentially if the doctor wants it and buys it, you're good to go. You don't have to have the million layers of approvals like it takes now. Say it's owned, that the doctor has a practice that now is owned by the hospital system. So if you live in New Jersey, especially where I grew up in Morris County, you can have a doctor that has an office in Morristown, but he is a member of Atlantic Health System. That practice is owned by the hospital system. Okay. So it's going to complicate things a little bit further, which we're not going to get into all that today. But basically in these offices, the doctor is going to be the one that makes that decision. Okay. So it's a little bit easier where, if the numbers make sense, if it's a pharmaceutical drug, there's very limited approvals or anything that needs to happen. Simply the doctor just has to, prescribe that drug. And then whether the patient has insurance or not, either they're covered and they're going to pay a low fee to get that prescription, or they're not going to be covered and have to pay full price for whatever pharmaceutical product. But at the end of the day, you just need to get that approval from the doctor. The doctor needs to find that right patient and you're good to go. Sounds simple, right, guys? It's not. All right. One of the key things that reps make a mistake. They get so, and I've done this too, so I'm not blaming anyone else. I'm most of these problems I've done and learned through my mistakes. And I think that happens for a lot of us, that it's okay to make mistakes, guys. But again, you just got to learn. That's how you're going to advance. But I made this mistake when I first started. I was so hyper-focused on the physician that I would overlook the other individuals that work on the staff. So I didn't try that hard the first few months in the field. I cared more about, I didn't try that hard with building relationships with all the other staff members, not just the doctor. Okay. You're going to learn this too the hard way, that especially when it comes to access, if you're coming in there and you're not learning, say that whoever is behind the front desk, whoever that individual is, you want to learn their name. You want to learn more than just their name, but you don't want to just keep going in there and they're telling you, sorry, Joe, not a good day. Sorry, Joe, he doesn't see reps. And all you're doing is walking back out. Okay. That's what I did at first. I would try to get an appointment book. No, sorry, Joe, it doesn't happen. And then I would go, come back to my manager. Hey, Dr. Jones, he's not seeing anybody. He's a no-see office. And I screwed up because I wasted a couple months that I could have been building relationships with that receptionist. And if you can't see the doctor, who else is available? Is there a nurse? Because a lot of times people, sales reps don't call on anyone except for the doctor. They're like, he's the decision maker. She's the decision maker. That's what I'm going to call on. And everyone else doesn't mean anything to me. Obviously, that's the wrong approach, guys. Because first and foremost, a lot of the access is controlled by those individuals. So that receptionist could say he's an OC doctor. And then before you know it, and this happened to me, it happens to a lot of reps, after a few months where you build that relationship, they'll tell another rep, sorry, no C office. And they'll be like, Joe, you know what? He's just between patients. Okay, go in the back. Just wait outside the exam rooms. You'll catch him popping out. And before you know it, now you have access. It's that simple, guys. So it's going to take time, but make sure they'll call it making the total office call. That means you're not just going in there just always focused on the doctor. Call on other people in the office. Some days, you're going to be going in there week after week with access or not, always saying, is Dr. Jones in? Is Dr. Jones in? Well, once in a while, why not ask for the nurse? Why not ask for Steve or Mary or whoever that is? Why not ask to speak to the office manager? And where you're not just talking about product all day long, but you're talking about something that they're concerned about. So this is very important, especially too, when you're selling, when you're talking about any kind of reimbursements or especially on the device side, because now a lot of the device interactions, the doctor, if he's doing, say, for instance, when I worked at Boston Scientific, they did in-office trials with our stimulator. So they would have to buy some of our equipment. They pay for it. Now, if we sell them that equipment, that's going to be a lot more than what they're going to get reimbursed for it. Guess what, guys? They're not going to do the procedures there anymore. So you have to make sure that you're having these conversations about reimbursement, about pricing, not only with the doctor, but you're going to have to 99% of the time have that conversation with an office manager. So you have to know your reimbursements. You obviously have to know the pricing, because if those numbers don't align, trust me, you will not be doing procedures in that environment much longer, especially in the office space, because that hits them directly. That comes right out of the doctor's pocket, right out of the practice's pockets. So that's something that you got to align. The whole point of this, what I'm trying to get to is you have to align whoever you're calling on in that practice. They're going to care about different things. It's not all the same. And typically when you're having those conversations with an office manager, it is going to be more about, of course they all care about the patients and the outcomes, but now this is going to be more of a financial discussion, because they're the ones that are helping to run that practice. If that office manager says yes to any product that's coming in there, and they're constantly losing money because they're not getting reimbursed, either that amount or more, then why would they do that? If they don't watch that, they could close down the practice, in months, because they can whack up all these bills and then none of the reimbursements. So now they're in debt just by doing a bunch of these procedures. So it's very important. So those are individuals in there that you want to focus on the financial, and then there could be some of the nursing staff where they might not care so much about the financial side. They care about the outcomes more. Okay. So then you're going to have a more clinical conversation with those individuals. And the doctor typically cares about all that stuff. They're going to care about the financial. They're going to care about the clinical. All those things are very important to the physician, because they always care about their patients and their practice. Those are the two most important things to a doctor. Okay, so you could address both, when you're calling on them. But the difference here in the office space, you don't have to get it all out at once, guys. Okay, you're going to be able to come back in there and fight another day. So don't make another big mistake that reps make, where when they finally do get access and they didn't have to do a lunch to get it or a breakfast, the receptionist says, you know what, he's actually, he's in between patients. Go ahead, see if you can catch him in the back, or go back to his office and wait for him to come out. He'll come in and see you. All right. So you don't have to get an hour presentation in because now you finally have access. You could focus on one selling point. So no matter what environment you're in, especially office-based, guys, because you could be in there once a week. You could be in there multiple times a week with it depends on some products. But say you're going to be in there every week, every other week, you don't have to get all that information out at once. Pick something that you want to discuss. At least have that in your back pocket, because you always want to be prepared for what's your elevator pitch. And you're going to hear that. What's the elevator pitch? That basically means what's your 30-second pitch. So have that prepared always when you're going into these doctors' offices. Okay. You want to make sure you have that ready, because many times that's what you're going to get. You're going to get the doctor going, hey, Joe, I'm sorry, today's not a good day, or I got a bunch of patients in the waiting room. What do you got for me? So at the very least, you want to have questions or some sort of quick presentation. If it's a study, for instance, quick tip. Many of you come in with the study. You don't even have it open up. You might just have the front cover, and then you talk to the doctor about the study. Wrong. Okay. You don't want to just get it and throw it into their hands. If you do that and you don't get to the point, you're going to see doctors just going like this. They're going to flip this study around. They're not looking at anything. They're basically just killing time until you get this thing out of their hands and you get the hell out of their face, but that's why you don't do that. You want to be direct. If there's a table or a graph on page 5, go right to page 5, have your pen out, your pointer, and say exactly what you want to talk about. And get right to the point, to what's the meat of your conversation. Get right to that in the study. If you're pulling out a detail aid, the same thing. There's detail aids a lot of times that they quote different studies, or there's one selling point that you want to get to and discuss. Go right to that section. Don't just hand them the study. Don't just hand them the detail aid. Get right to the point and then specifically talk about that. Okay. This is going to save you time. So this is how a lot of the interactions in the office space are going to go. Now, when we move on to more complicated selling, where there's more layers, now we're focused on surgery centers. Now, this has changed over the years. So a lot of the surgery centers, were typically owned by physicians or owned by a group. Okay, so one of the models, a bunch of physicians get together. Say you'll have a surgeon, an anesthesiologist, and maybe, a couple internists, whoever that is, they get together and go, let's open our own surgery center. Right. So now they open this together. Now they're all part owners. Right. So now it changes a little bit because you went from Dr. Jones, who was in the office and owned his own practice, to now there's 5 or 6 different owners. All right. So now you got to talk a little differently. It's changing a little bit. It does become much more financial. Right. Because we're assuming your product works. We're assuming that everything is going to be there for the patient and it's going to bring value. Again, because I'm not going to downplay and sit here and say that, patient outcomes don't matter. They matter at every level in every environment. So we're going to assume all that. But there's going to be many more, not only the clinical, but you're going to have a much more financial, benefits by using your product. So when it comes down, I'll give you one thing that I learned the hard way. We had pricing for one of our products at a certain number. Okay. And I was selling that in the hospital stays at that price. And then I went in like an idiot with the same approach to the surgery center. Okay. So this is a lesson in not knowing your reimbursements. So you're going to get reimbursed differently depending if you do a procedure in the hospital than if you do it in the surgery center. So there's going to be different codes and different payments. You're going to see the payments are going to be different when you're coming into a surgery center. So now, just to make numbers simple, if I sell a product for $10,000 to that surgery center, I could be excited that I got them to agree to that price, because all of these, especially on the device side, you're not going to just go in there and do procedures. I mean, it happens, but you want to make sure you have those financial conversations first. So you're having that with the manager of that surgery center. You're having that with your clinicians to make sure that you're all on par, that everything makes sense. Because if I sell a $10,000 product and I come in there and I do a case and I'm all excited I did that case, this is great. You put down your bill where you're listing all the equipment you have, and then you leave the bill with the purchaser, the surgery center, or the manager. It could be sometimes. And then you leave, they give you a PO, they give you a purchase order, you submit it, you made a good, nice $10,000 sale, you're all excited. Now, all of a sudden, the reimbursement comes back and they only got reimbursed $6,000. Now it costs them $4,000 to do that procedure in that building. So what do you think is going to happen, guys? And I can tell you what's going to happen. They're either not going to do it there anymore, or you better come in there and rework your pricing with them if you want them to continue to do this. Because if the numbers don't make sense, it's over. And I had that happen to me. I was charging too much. I was excited that I got those prices. I actually did get a couple of cases in, and I felt, wow, this is great. The staff loved me. The doctor loved me. We had a great relationship going. Everything was great. All of a sudden, they start seeing how they're getting paid and reimbursed. Done. So then the doctor, the first thing he did, because he did like me, he did like the product, he did like the outcomes. So we had to start doing them at the hospital. So we took everything over to the hospital. Now everything changes, because if you're in device, you guys learn this. Some of you not in device yet. This is very important. If you're going to do that, and now you got to go from the surgery center to device, one of the big differences is getting that purchase order. So a lot of surgery centers they'll give you a PO that day. You'll literally submit your bill and they go, wait, Joe, just let me give you a PO. I'll have it for you in a couple minutes. Or they'll say, hey, I'll get that to you by the end of the week. And that's usually it's very quick, because trust me, guys, you don't want to chase after POs. That's what happens at the end of the quarter a lot in device, where you're chasing. You did all these cases, okay? You're killing it. You've done more cases this quarter than you ever did, and you still don't hit your number because you didn't get those purchase orders in. So all these numbers that are proving that they're verifying basically. So what a purchase order is, what a PO is basically that account saying, yes, here's the confirmation that we purchased this equipment, right? Because a lot of times you got to go back. If there's a problem, they'll say, give us the PO, or if there's a mess up with the bill, if you have to add something, it's basically getting like a reference number. It's all it really is, to say like, yep, you did sell us this. We approved it. So, but you got to go around and get those numbers and match them up to the cases that you had. So if you let a lot of these slip, drag on, where you did a case, sometimes I worked with reps that you did a case 2 months ago and you still didn't get the PO for that. When that quarter is coming up, guys, people are scrambling to get purchase orders. You're not the only one doing it. So now you're trying to get the time of Susan or Bob, whoever the purchaser is, whoever the office manager is. And now they're like, I'm sorry, I'm too crazy right now. I don't have the time for this, because they still have other duties. Sometimes they're in cases that they're covering and they don't have time for your stupid PO. So if you don't get that in, that didn't happen. So now you're going to not hit your number and then potentially get that PO for the next quarter. All right, which we'll talk about later too. So you got to make sure, guys, that number one, your pricing makes sense, and you have to know your reimbursements. You have to. I mean, you should know all this anyway, but once you start getting into these different, basically different businesses, you got to approach it like a business person. You can't just go in, oh, well, the doctor loves me and loves my product. They're not going to care to lose money on every case. What? No, it doesn't make business sense. They're not going to use you. So you have to have that aligned. Don't make the mistake that I made. Of course, you want to get the highest price you can get, but you got to be realistic. If the reimbursements aren't there, you're not going to continue to just have them lose money, especially in the surgery centers. These are owned by doctors or owned by someone who's going to feel that right away. All right. So that's the big lesson when it comes to surgery centers. So you got to have that understanding and know the difference. Again, when we're talking about doctors, again, there's usually only one doctor. There could be multiple doctors. There's more people. There's not as many layers of red tape like hospitals, but there's still approvals that have to happen. And then it also changes when you're in a surgery center. A lot of them now are owned by the hospitals and the hospital systems. So you're essentially going under the same rules as those hospitals, and that changes it. So a lot of times you could be in a surgery center, and if it's owned by the hospital or the system, it's all the same rules as the hospital. So now we'll talk about that. And that's basically, now we're talking about hospital-based sales. This is a completely different animal, guys. So when I started at Organon, I spent 2 years in office-based sales selling NuvaRing, which is a birth control, Avinza, which is a pain med. I sold another antidepressant. I sold a few products, and I did well. I got promoted to the hospital team, and I thought, well, I'm going to kick ass in hospital too. This is going to be a piece of cake, especially because I was selling now anesthesia products, and one of our products at the time was one leader in market share. It had like 93 or 92% market share, which is great. A quick lesson about that, guys. When you have to improve 92% market share, it sucks, because try to find those doctors or patients. Everyone loves the product. Now you got to get them up to 95, 96, 97%. It's very, very hard to show a growth when you already have 90+% improvement. So that's going to happen, guys. And that was my, just quick side note. When I was selling my neuromuscular blocker in the hospital environment, I got excited saying everyone loves it. Yeah, but now I got to improve that. So that's very hard to do. That's easy to do when you have no market share and you have nowhere to go with up. But a lot of times when we have to grow high market share, it's very difficult. So you always want to ask more questions when you're in these interviews. And these are some of the things that we're going to talk about. And we do talk about when reps are looking at certain jobs at the RepPath Academy. We're going to coach you on this and what the right approach is, and maybe not be the best opportunity for you. You might think it is, but we're going to talk about all the pros and cons and really break that down. So just be wary of, don't always get excited when you have the number one product with all the market share. You got to ask them how you're going to get paid. And if that's paid on growth, that could be challenging. So just make a note of that if any of you are experiencing that situation. But now let's get back to that hospital-based sale. So first big challenge, big difference. Most offices and ambulatory surgery centers are at least going to let you in the building, okay? They could still be a no-see, right? But you're at least allowed in the building. Now that changes in hospital. Okay, you're not going to be able to just walk past security and just keep walking around the hospital and then sneak in. This is the way it was 20 plus years ago, where you would come with scrubs on. You know, most of the time the hospitals wear a certain color scrub. So if it's dark blue, you come in with dark blues on. Navy blue, green, excuse me. You would come in matching what everyone else is wearing and then be able to just walk around, go and post up outside of the operating room, you know, sometimes within the operating rooms, and you can wait when doctor is coming out of exam 3, exam 4. And then once he comes out, hey, Dr. Jones, I got something to show you, right? Or you go into the lounge and wait for doctors to come in and out. And then you're picking them off as they're coming in. You could have your presentation table set up. So sometimes as they're eating a sandwich, you'll be like, hey, what's that over there? And you could explain it to them. All that, again, sounds easy, but you have to be credentialed first. All right. So you can't just walk into hospitals. You have to get credentialed. So if you don't know what that is, look up these companies. There's one company called IntelliCentrics. There's another one called VendorMate, another one called Simpler, SYMPLR. I may have spelled that wrong, but you'll figure that out. It's basically a different credentialing service, but they want to see that you have, number one, you have all your vaccinations. You know, so I know during COVID, this was very sensitive time, and a lot of people who didn't want to get the COVID vaccine, that's okay. That's your prerogative. But when it comes to these companies and access to hospitals, they required that you had the vaccine. So you couldn't say, well, you know, you could say what you want. That's my belief. I don't want to do it. Okay. But they also are going to say you can't come in this hospital. All right. Now, this and many other vaccines are required, or other tests. They want to see proof that you've had stuff done, like your hepatitis B, I'm drawing a blank, but your chicken pox, you know, a bunch of different vaccines, they have to be done. Okay. Then you also have education requirements where you have to read up on bloodborne pathogens or OR techniques, all these different things that are required that you have to take, and also have to take continuing education. Okay. And then submit all your credentials about your background, your personal information. So there's a lot of requirements. Okay. And it is tedious. I'm not going to lie, you know, but the good thing is once you're signed up with one, they ask for a lot of the same requirements. So you can, you know, get credentialed at all three of the main credentialing sites. But, you know, it's still a pain in the ass, guys. You know, it's a lot of work, especially when you have so many other things going on that you just want to do your job. And now you got to worry about this getting credentialed, because the thing that's challenging about credentialing, we always forget to do, say, a continuing education course, or there's something you submitted the paperwork to something that you thought was already approved. Now you're in there and you're calling on that hospital. You have a case that day and you're not approved. That one piece of paperwork now they don't have. So when you go in to sign in, because you'll walk in the hospital most of the time and go to security, and they'll usually have the sign-in desk there where you type in your information, all of a sudden a denied red X comes up. That means you can't go in. You have a case starting maybe in the next 10 minutes and you're not allowed to walk into the hospital that day. Guys, it sucks. I've been there. Okay. Cause now you gotta rush to figure out how to tell the doctor this without him going, you know what? Okay, screw it. I'll just call Susan or I'll call Bill. They'll be here in a second from another company to do this case. And believe me, they will do that. They're not going to blow the case because of your stupid problem. All right. Some will be a little bit more understanding and give you time to try to fix it. But a lot of times that case is happening. So you don't want to be in that situation. This is one of the biggest challenges now that have come, in the increasing the challenge of access is vendor credentialing. It's also expensive as shit. All right. You could spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars per site, a couple of thousand per year, just on vendor credentialing. So somebody that work for distributors or somebody that work for smaller mom and pops or 1099s out there where that comes out of your pocket, trust me, guys, that hurts to just you're spending thousands on something just to get in a hospital. You didn't sell anything yet. It's just to have the opportunity to say, yep, if you use me, I'll be there. Right. So that is a huge, huge differentiator between the other two environments. And a lot of times the surgery centers now are credentialed the same way. So if it's part of a hospital system and you're not on VendorMate and you can't right now you're not going to be able to go into that hospital and you have a surgery center that also is affiliated with that hospital system, you could get rejected there too. So this is one of the big challenges that you got to realize what you're getting into. But more importantly is the big difference in hospital. It's the length of time to get things done. All right. So the two big avenues between device and capital and pharmaceutical sales, you have to get products approved first. Okay. So I can't go in there to a hospital and tell a doctor, for instance, called on anesthesia for years, if my drugs weren't on formulary. The formulary is the list of drugs that they're allowed to use in that hospital. Doesn't matter how much a doctor loves a drug. If it's not on the formulary, they can't use it at the hospital. They won't be there for them. Okay. It's not like I can sneak in a couple samples and leave it for the doctor. Be like, when you're ready to use it, just use these. And then we'll bill you later. No, it doesn't work that way, guys. So there's approval process. And when it comes to the hospitals, it's got to get approved by P&T. You're going to hear that. Who's the P&T committee? All right. And so these are different members. The P&T is the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee of the hospital. Okay. So these are different members at every hospital. So for instance, when I was calling on anesthesia, I always thought, well, it's always going to be the chief of anesthesia is going to be on P&T. It's not true. So there's some hospitals where it is true and it is the chief. And then there's times that, it could be the vice chairman is on the committee, or it could be someone else, another anesthesiologist within the group. You don't know. So, but you have to find out who these individuals are because they're going to be the ones at these meetings. So what happens is P&T will meet once a month, once every other month, and then they'll go over different topics. And then whenever there's a new drug that someone wants to get approved, so if, GlaxoSmithKline or Pfizer, whoever it is, has a new product, that sales rep is in there. That sales rep is not allowed at the P&T committee. Excuse me. Give me one sec. Sorry. So they're not allowed in those meetings. So what you have to get is a champion. So you need a doctor that really believes in your product, loves your product, and also is going to be at that meeting because you got to make sure of this, and is going to present why we should get this product in our hospital. Why should it get approved? He presents it to the committee. You don't present it. So a couple key tips for this. If any of you guys are in this situation for the first time, number one, you have to know when those meetings are. Because, rookie mistake I made, there was a meeting in 3 weeks. I'm meeting with the doctor today. Got all my information, got studies for him. Doctor loves the product. Everything's great. He's ready to go. I come back a month later. Hey, Dr. Jones, how was that meeting? Dr. Jones didn't even make it to the meeting. This happens a lot. They had cases come up. A lot of times they just forgot to go to the meeting because they got a million other things. They're not worried just about your drug to get approved. So don't make that same mistake. If you know that meeting is in 3 weeks, You are in there the day before, the day of, a couple days before. You want to have your information and your presentation with your champion that's fresh in their minds. So they're going to be there. And I would be at the hospital that day if I could, just one more time to make sure that that physician is going to that meeting, sending reminders, because that's the worst thing, guys. Your company's not going to care if the doctor missed the meeting. They're not going to go, well, it's okay, we'll be patient because we understand things happen. Bullshit. They're going to say, sorry, man, that's your fault. At the end of the day, you're not hitting your number. They don't care. You have to make sure that individual went to that meeting. So it's very important. And then once it gets approved, then you can actually, the doctors can actually use that product. But this is a long period, guys. You're going to have to discuss pricing. They're going to have to get the approvals from not only from the P&T, but now it'll also, they could have an evaluation phase too. That happens sometimes. So it could take anywhere from 3 to 2 years, 3 months to 2 years. I've seen both extremes. 3 months is fast. So if you're interviewing with a job that's in the hospital space and it's pharmaceuticals, and they want things done by, say, January, they want to see an impact, guys, you got to have these conversations with them. Because sometimes these companies, they come out and they get excited or they have unrealistic goals. So you want to set expectations from those meetings during the interview phase. You don't want to just say, I'll make it happen. That's unrealistic. And it also could be a test to see if you have a clue on how much work that actually is, or, and if it's even possible to get something approved in a month in a hospital. It's not. So they could be testing you. So you need to know that it's going to take realistically a minimum of 6 months to really make anything happen. So that's why a lot of times in the hospital space, if they hire a rep, they're going to commit to that rep at least for a year, maybe 2, because it does take a lot of time. On the flip side, they don't want to hear that every day that, hey, it's slow, but it takes time. They don't want to hear that all the time, guys. So you got to get things moving. You got to have at least the next step in the process moving forward. Okay. So similar to the pharma, device has, instead of the P&T committee, they have the VAC committee, and that's the value analysis committee, right? So same thing. I come in there with my device. I can't just give it to a doctor to use. It's got to be approved. So then it also could have to get approved through whatever GPO they're a part of. That's a group purchasing organization. We're not going to get into all that today, but that's just another layer that you have to have your product on for it to be used during a surgery. But let's just keep it simple with the value analysis committee, the VAC committee. You need to find out who's on these committees, and then who's going to be your champion, who's going to go in there and present your device. And you got to take the same approach. When is the meeting? Be in there, when it's fresh in their mind, right before they're going in, the day before, whatever that is. But you got to make sure, guys, because that committee might not meet for another couple of months. So you got to make sure that you're lining all this up, getting all the right information that doctor will need to present, and really differentiate why your product should be approved. What does it bring to the table, in terms of outcomes with patients, in terms of pricing. There's got to be a reason. They're not just going to keep approving everything. They don't do that. They want more simplicity. They don't want doctors to have a million products to choose from just because it's their new flavor of the week. Okay, so you got to make sure that's all lined up to get that approved. All right, so just wanted to give a little overview of the 3 different environments to show that the complexity continues to increase from when you're going from office to surgery center to hospital base. But I'm going to shut up right now and see if we have any questions. James, any questions?
Yeah, we got a couple questions. No movie reference today. Maybe we got some questions.
Yeah, it's going to come natural. So we'll see.
Joe, how should reps think about account penetration differently between offices and hospitals?
Well, I think the, in terms of, like we were talking about at the end, in terms of timeline, you got to be realistic that you could walk in there into an office. For instance, if you're selling a new pharmaceutical drug, you could walk in that day. The doctor can say to you, I mean, this has happened to me. It's rare, but it has happened. Joe, I think this would be great for my XYZ patients. I actually have someone coming in later today who I'm gonna prescribe this to. I think this would be the perfect drug for her. And you get a script that day. And then you go to the hospital side of things. That's never happening ever, ever. It will not happen, guys. So don't think that you're going to be the first one to walk into a hospital and get a doctor to prescribe your drug that day. It cannot happen. It's got to be approved by the P&T committee. There's all these things that have to happen first. So it's going to take months. So the biggest difference is that timeline. And you gotta be able to have a real understanding and patience, because the toughest thing when you're selling in the hospital space is knowing that things take time and then balancing that with your company, because they know that, but they also don't give a shit as much. They're not going to give you as much leeway as you think you should get. They're always going to push, guys. They're going to want results. So you got to balance that, where you got to get those results, but you also can't jam your timeline down the doctor and the hospital's throats, because it's not going to get you anywhere. So you just have to have an understanding that these things do take time, but you also have to be aggressive with that timeline and keep moving the ball forward. So those are the big differences between those two environments.
We have, what's the fastest way to get banned from an office?
Fastest way to get banned from an office? Piss people off. Ignore when the receptionist says you can't go back there, and just walk back there. That'll get you kicked out. Looking at information that you shouldn't be looking at. I've heard some crazy stories where people wanted to get the doctor's schedule so they can be at a hospital, over the next couple of weeks, and they know when he's doing certain cases. They open up his day planner. It's crazy stuff. It sounds ridiculous, but do anything that is invasion of privacy with a patient that could get you banned, that could get you fired. Who knows? But don't listen to protocols. That could get you banned from an office, especially if you don't respect that front office person, whoever that is. And remember, they're the gatekeeper. So you don't want to piss off that person. Piss them off, and that'll be an easy way of never being allowed back.
How do you build influence in hospitals when you can't rely on personal relationships alone like you can in offices?
Well, that's not true. You definitely can rely on, you definitely are building relationships in every environment, whether it's surgery centers, office, hospitals. A lot of times you're calling on a doctor in an office that you're also calling on the same doctor in a hospital. So the key is, no matter what environment, is understanding the lay of the land in that space. So it doesn't matter. You're going to be able to see the same people a lot of times, but sometimes you might not get any access to that doctor in a hospital, because if it's someone you're trying to, that doesn't use you yet, but you could see them in an office, or vice versa. You never see them in an office, but when you're doing cases with Dr. Jones, you want to see Dr. Williams, and you happen to see Williams in the hospital walking by. Of course, now it's a great time to see him. But that is the big difference. Relationships are built in every environment. So it's not true that just because you have them in office doesn't mean you're going to have them in hospital, and vice versa. So you could build them in any environment. That's just not true. It's just how you go about it that changes depending on, what space you're in.
Joe, is bringing food actually helpful? And if it is, does it work the same in all environments?
It's definitely helpful. Yeah, again, you don't want to, one of the things that sucks with the job is when you feel like you'll hear a lot of reps saying, I feel like I'm a glorified caterer. Doctors won't see me unless I come in with a lunch, or a breakfast. And yes, sometimes that's true. Some offices, they'll outright say, we will not see you unless you schedule a breakfast or lunch. And it's a little deflating, because you're like, geez, I'm doing all this. And I feel like I'm talking about intelligent products and having these intelligent conversations. Now I can't even see someone unless I bring them a sandwich. It sucks, but guys, who cares? If that's how they'll see you and your company's going to pay for it, who cares? Now, the challenge is that when it comes to to food, you only have a certain budget. So you're not going to be able to just buy your way with lunches into every single office. Most companies, they have limited budgets now. And a lot of doctors, since the Sunshine Act came out, that Sunshine Act is shedding light on the spending. That's why they call it Sunshine. But it tracks all the money that's spent on each physician. So a lot of times doctors, if they're a part of a group, their partners can say, hey, look, there was X amount spent on you last year. You're not doing lunches anymore. You're not doing breakfast, or you only could do, half of what you used to do, and all of a sudden it cuts it down. So it's a part of the game that it sucks. I never really liked it. I hate ordering the food. I hate having to go pick it up. Sometimes they don't deliver. You got to carry the stuff in. It could be a real pain in the ass, but it's part of the job. So the bottom line, if it can increase your access and get you in front of that doctor, do it. Who cares? So what? You're a glorified caterer that day. At the end of the day, though, if that helps your bonus checks and helps you, in the leaderboard and become a better rep, then I would do whatever it takes. So it's not the most glamorous part of the job, but if it can increase your access, guys, just do it as much as you can.
How often is too often to stop by an office?
That's a tough one. I mean, again, on the pharmaceutical side, when I was in pharma, you're going to have a call frequency, and it will be, usually it's 12, 24, or 48. And that means 12 times a year, 24 times a year, 48 times a year. So that's really broken down with holidays, vacations, and everything. It's once a week, every other week, once a month. That's the typical call frequency when it comes to pharma, because there's few, I'm not going to get into rare disease where it changes a little bit, identifying specific patients, but typical pharma office-based role, to be in there more than once a week, that's a lot. Sometimes you do have to be in there, but if the bottom line is, because device could be a totally different animal. There were doctors that I were in their office every day, and the diagnostic side could be every day, depending on if you have a collector in there getting, whatever samples, you could be in there a lot. So, but realistically, there is no amount, there is no exact timeline. Twice a month in one office could be a lot. And then twice a week in another office, could be a lot or a little. It really depends. So that's a tough one. But just to give you a more realistic answer, you're going to be, for my top customers, I was in the office more in device than I was with my top customers in pharma. So typically in pharma, it was rare to be in there more than once a week. And then in device, I could be in there a couple of times a week. So you have, just be able to be, to read the room, guys. If you're going in there and you have no value to bring, then don't go in there again. This is the time where you got to feel the room and have common sense. If the last couple of times they have nothing else to tell you and you're rushing back in there just because the company is saying you should be in there X amount of times. I mean, this is where you have a conversation with your boss, and be like, I know the company wants me in here, but here's how the conversations really went down. And we have something coming up in another week. So I thought it'd be a good time to, take a step back, let whatever happens in a week happen, and then go in for follow-up. So now you have a reason to come in where you're not so annoying. So just use common sense, guys. Read the room. If you're getting comments like, oh, you're here again, and you're really not coming in there with any value, but just to show your face, don't be one of those reps. Because again, you're going to piss people off. And all of a sudden you'll see the access change. You'll see that relationship kind of change, because you don't want to be that annoying rep.
Joe, how much does the front desk power does the front desk really have?
They can have a lot. I mean, at the end of the day, they're the gatekeeper. So, you could be friends with the doctor and they could be like, oh, Joe, just ignore her up front or ignore him up front. Guys, at the end of the day, they still control you coming in. So always assume that they have all the power in the world, because they do at that point, especially when you first go in there. The doctor doesn't mean anything yet unless you can get past that gatekeeper. So the lesson here is, guys, respect them, always pay attention to them, If you can do something for them, when you're coming in there and you're bringing in a lunch one day, and you could stop and pick them up a cup of coffee, that is their favorite cup, or is there something they like, and you could do that. Or you just go in there and ask them how their kids are doing. How was Brian's soccer game last week? Not just doing with the physician, show that you care, showing them, that you show them that you're paying attention to them and you care about the conversations you're having, because it could go a long way. So always show that importance, because you never know. One time I rushed past the receptionist. It turned out it was the doctor's wife. So that went off like terribly. Obviously, I didn't get off on the right foot there, but you live and learn. But bottom line, treat them with the same respect that you would treat anyone else, the doctor. Everyone should be at that same level, because you never know how much power they have.
We have, what does a strong follow-up look like in an office versus a hospital?
Really, it doesn't change. It really depends on what the follow-up is. But the key, no matter if you're in a hospital or an office base, is leaving that previous meeting, letting them know what the next steps are. That's key. Because if you just leave those meetings and don't have a next step set up, it's going to be harder for you to get back in. So for instance, again, doesn't matter hospital or office space. If I'm leaving that meeting today and I go, okay, Dr. Jones, so we already discussed that you wanted to get more information from my company about XYZ criteria, which I'm going to follow up with our clinical team and get you the answers to that. And you mentioned that you have 3 patients that you're going to see this week that could benefit from my drug. Or you mentioned that, you're going to meet with your partners on Friday to discuss if they want to utilize my device. So I'm going to be in here next Thursday again to make sure that I get an update on how that went. Okay. So now at least you set the expectations from the previous meeting. If you just come in next Thursday without discussing that with the doctor, it's going to be harder. Sometimes, the doctor will be like, what is he talking? I have no idea. I don't remember saying that for him to come in. You want to set those expectations because it'll make the next meeting easier. It doesn't matter if it's hospital or office based, always have expectations and a reason to come in the next time. Don't just have those blind walk-ins. A lot of times they don't work well. So make sure you're setting it up on the previous calls.
We have Ricardo Lanes from LinkedIn. Hi, Joseph. Ricardo here from PT Tech to medical sales, former personal trainer. I don't know what the question is there, Ricardo. We have in offices, in offices, I just drop in ASCs. I feel like I'm in the way. Why?
Well, again, you got to look at yourself and see, why are you going in there? Are you just popping in to just pop in? You got to have a reason to be in there. So it shouldn't matter if you're in the office or the hospital or a surgery center. You have to go in there with a purpose. So if you're just walking in there and then they allow you in the back and now you change into scrubs and you're just standing around, what the heck did you go there for? So that would be my question. If anybody has that feeling like you always feel like you're in the way, that's a good sign that you're not bringing any value. It shouldn't matter what space you're in. You shouldn't feel that way. And if you feel like you're in the way in a scheduled case, then you have to reflect and look and say like, okay, well, what is my role in this case? And try to stay in your lane, guys. So there's a lot of reps out there that, you want to make sure it's okay with the hospital or it's okay with the doctor where their part of the case, it could be only at certain parts of the procedure where when they're closing, they could be selling sutures. And that's the only time that you really have to be involved. But throughout the rest of the case, they're chiming in and acting like a know-it-all and getting involved, talking, not shutting up. Those are red flags. They don't want to hear that. Go there for what your purpose is. And if they ask you to help out with something else or ask your opinion with something, then you provide it. But don't just jump in and just be that person that's getting too involved, because then you could feel like you're in the way. Go there and be the master of whatever your goal is and whatever your part of the procedure is. And then if they need more, they'll tell you. That's the best way to approach it.
Do you prep differently for each place?
I guess it depends on the meeting. So if I'm going into a meeting, whether it's hospital or office, usually with the hospital, since those meetings typically are harder just to walk in and just see someone, then I'm going to make sure that I'm more prepared. But really it comes down to, what is that about? If I'm just following up with a patient and I'm going in to talk to that doctor about that patient, I mean, that could be all I need to do that day. I'm always making sure that I have a reason to come in the following time, and I'm setting that up. But no matter what it is, no matter what space it is, it really depends on the meeting. I mean, there could be a quarterly review. We used to have biannual reviews with the CEO at certain accounts when I was at my robotics company. Now that's a very important meeting. Or if you're going to meet, with the doctor that has that meeting with the VAC committee later that day, very important. So you're going to really make sure that everything is tightened up and you're going to, have all the material that you need to have. But the bottom line is, guys, you don't want to go into any meeting, half-assed and just kind of do a drop in and not really have a reason to be there, because it gets hard. When you're calling on offices week after week, you start running out of things to talk about. So you got to keep it fresh and always try to bring more value and not get stale. And it's not easy. I'd be lying to you if I said I went in there every single time with some specific goal that 100% this is my plan, my objective. I mean, sometimes I did just walk in there because I didn't know what else to talk to the doctor about. I'm not proud of that, but it's real. So you want to minimize those as much as possible, because you could do those once in a while, drop in, say hello, that's fine. But if you do that all the time, guys, you're going to be that annoying rep that they don't need that. You're taking time away out of their day. So it really depends on the meeting, but always go in there fully prepared, like it is the last time you're going to get time with this doctor, because that'll help you in your preparation so you don't come in a little half-assed and blow a meeting.
Do you change your pitch when you're in an office versus a surgery center?
Well, this gets back to what we said earlier, where it depends on who you're calling on. So sometimes it could be a nurse or a physician that is more focused on the clinical aspects. Or it could be, a meeting, say, with an office manager in a surgery center that cares all about the dollars and cents. So now it's got to be more financial. So know your customer first, and that'll dictate the conversation you're going to have, because this is very important in the hospital. You're not going to have the same discussion with a doctor that could be more clinical. Now, all of a sudden, you're meeting with a CFO, and I'm having that same clinical conversation. They're going to be like, what the hell who are you talking to? I have no idea what you're saying. So bottom line is, know your customer and then change your approach depending on who that customer is. I think we have time for one more, James.
I was just going to say, I think I got one more for you. Joe, if a rep is struggling to sell, how often is it because they're using the wrong sales approach for the environment?
I mean, it happens a lot. I don't know the exact percentage, but one of the reasons why reps screw up with selling, and this is just it sounds simple, but it's not. And that is, they talk too much and listen less. Flip that. If you listen more, and talk less, you're going to be a more successful sales rep. Bottom line, that's it. It's just that simple. If you're struggling, you're not listening enough. That's typically is the case. You're getting in there and just shooting out features and benefits. You're not connecting it to the real, outcomes that they're looking for. So you have to find out what your customers' key drivers are first, and then sell to those drivers. And the only way to do that is by listening, and they'll tell you what they are when you're asking the right questions. So ask more questions, listen more, talk less, and you'll see the results.
Yeah, that's all we got today, Joe.
Perfect. Well, thank you, guys. Thank you, James. Again, a lot of great questions, guys. So I appreciate that. Before I forget, again, guys, if you want to see the copy of this podcast, make sure you go to Unfiltered Medical Sales Coaching on YouTube. Click and subscribe. It's free. And then for all you individuals that really are serious about breaking into this industry and you're tired of waiting, don't waste another minute. Go on RepPath.com, learn more about the Academy and sign up today because we can help you break in, guys. We've been doing this for years. We have candidates all around the world that we've helped get there. This is not some nonsense, sales academy online. We're going to work with you. We're going to combine the online approach also with the live group sessions that we do every week. And that's where the real value is, guys. It's interacting not only with me and my team, but also with the other members that are in the community. This is how you really learn, and this is how you become a better candidate. So please make sure you do that. Again, we're going to do these calls every Monday and Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So our next one will be Wednesday. So I hope you guys can all join us then. Any other questions, feel free to DM me. And if not, you guys have a great week. Thank you so much.
Lobby members.
Yeah, I'm always forgetting something.
Almost made it through the whole show, Joe.
Almost. So again, guys, thank you, James. All lobby members, please make sure that you add the passcode Licata, Licata, so you can get additional discounts. But other than that, I think that's it. And if I don't talk to you guys, have a great week.